amazing. We're doing something we haven't done in a little while,
Oh.
which is feet balancing.
Whoa.
So, just to give a bit of a heads up, you might have noticed that we didn't talk about testing grounds
I did notice, yes.
in the schedule, right? The reason for that is because we were actually going to put a bunch of, like, all we're going to be talking about for feed balancing specifically into a testing ground. But then as we were working on it, we decided, well, you know what? We can actually just push this live and do it now instead of going to a testing ground. We're very, very confident with these changes for those. So we're like, well, we're going to do it now. And then instead of like testing ground and pushing it in 3 months.
Yeah.
So this is why there's no testing ground this season. We wanted to make sure that, you know, stuff could get pushed right now. That would be good.
Nice.
Right. So let's go over it. So for tier 1 feats that we're looking at, right? So first we have Ki. It deals 80 stamina damage. It used to just deal like 120 or something. It was always it was guaranteed to put you out of stamina every single time, right?
Yeah.
So at 80, what it does is at least you have to think a little bit more when you're gonna use it. I paid the price in a PlayStation we did earlier this week, where I put it and I forgot that we had did that balancing change, and then oops, somebody wasn't out of stamina, and I kind of wasted my feet. It's not a total waste, but it's still, you know, it's not as useful. So really, the idea here is we want to make sure that people are thinking about it a little bit more for when they're going to trigger it. Then we have Sinister Shield, so Blackbriar is tier 1. So it's been overperforming a bit. Blackbriar is very, very strong. His feats are extremely strong. And in this case, we want to rebalance it a little bit so that first, you have to sacrifice a bit more health to give the shield. The shield, the amount that you give is the same, but Blackbriar has to pay a bit more of a cost, right? It's easy to heal with BP. You don't have to worry too much about it. So with this, like, it just, again, it's a bit more of a price to pay. And we also lowered the duration of the shield by 2 seconds. So that's 8 instead of 10. So again, like, lowering it a little bit so that there's a bit more risk to using it. There's a little bit less reward as well, but it's still a very good feat.
Yeah.
Shields are good. There's a lot of good stuff that coming with shields, so that's amazing there.
Cool.
Next, we have Gravity Pull, which is Affiliation tier 1. So 2 big changes to it. First, it deals 15 damage instead of 20. And we've also increased the cooldown to 90 seconds. It used to be 60, right? So Affira is overperforming. Again, we've been talking about it a little bit. Her feats are a big portion as to why she's a bit too strong right now. So by changing that feat, it's very useful, right? From neutral, you do stuff. You can do it for out of stamina, from a lot of different things. So it's very, very useful. It's hard to react to for a lot of players. It guarantees gank setups and stuff. So by lowering the cooldown, one of the big things that it does is that normally at 60 seconds, it's one of our metrics. Typically, you get into a fight every minute-ish while you're playing, right? Unless you're camping a point and you're just saying, you know, whatever. But you get into a fight every minute-ish. So that feat was available pretty much every single fight. At 90 seconds, it's every fight and a half.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit, you have to think, again, you have to think a little bit more when you're going to be using it. You still unlock it really early.
Right.
You're still going to use it quite a bit. But there's going to be that downside there of you have to think about more when you're going to be using it. And the damage being lowered also kind of impacts a lot of the ganking potential and the damage potential out of that feat. So again, like a nice little change there, a bit of a nerf, but it's good. Finally, we have Take Shelter, which is Varangian's tier 1. I'm saying that right, I think.
You did, yeah.
Awesome. I kept messing it up. Yeah, right. So her first feat, it was healing for 10 every time you superior block. We're lowering it to 5. It's a change that we were potentially going to do for launch. We were a bit concerned with the power level of the feat. The feat is pretty good, right? Varangian. In a good position, generally, like a very strong hero.
Yeah.
But feats are, like, that feat specifically was a bit too strong. So putting it down to 5 should be a bit more equal to, it still heals more than a lot of healing feats. It has more healing potential than a lot of feats have throughout an entire game. But at 5, at least it's cut in half, so it's still going to be good. It still cleanses, so that effect is still there.
Yeah.
It's very good. We actually need to cleanse when we heal for the moment, because otherwise they have potential issues with bleeding and so all sorts of things that it kind of messes with the UI quite a bit. So we want to make sure that this stays there. That's good and it works well.
Nice.
Let's look at tier 2 feats. We have one change here, which is Juggernaut. So Juggernaut is, like, I remember reading on some Discords and a lot of stuff that well, Juggernaut still exists, so it doesn't matter. So we're nerfing Juggernaut. So 2 things, right? The damage reduction is now 20% instead of 50, and we increase the cooldown to 120 seconds, up from 90. The big thing here is that, like, Juggernaut, basically, usually we would just pop it. We wanted to keep the armor on it, by the way, right? When you pop Juggernaut, you get, like, full armor the whole time when you're attacking. So you're very, very hard to punish. But the big thing here is by lowering the damage reduction, you take a lot less favorable trades, right? It's still 20%. You're still generally favorable, but less favorable than 50%. If I'm gonna throw a heavy at you, you're not gonna take 12, right? You're gonna take much more. So that makes a big difference there. And also making the cooldown a bit longer. Make sure that you have to think a bit more when you're gonna pop it. So that makes it nice. One thing here that looks like it's probably missing, because I know a lot of people in chat are probably going, "What about Shinobi? What about shooting stars?
What about
right?" And I just want to bring up shooting stars very, very, very quickly because we're aware that defeat has an issue with hitting the same target multiple times. It is not the easiest thing to land, and we debated a lot internally as to do we take shooting stars, nerf it to the ground, and make it do 5 damage, and feel extremely bad in most situations, like 95% of situations, to account for the edge case that occurs once in a while where it's gonna hit multiple times for the same person. And we decided to keep it as is for now because we're looking at reworking the feat entirely so that the issue just cannot happen anymore. But that's not coming right now. So I wanted to make sure I address it. We're not ignoring it. We know it's a problem. We are going to fix it. We're going to change it. But for now, we made the decision not to kill it just because we tried it at 5 damage. And it's like you throw it, and most of the times you don't even see your opponent's health bar move, right? And so even as a tier 2, that felt really, really, really bad. So we wanted to make sure that it was still, usable when you're playing matchmaking. We know the feat is banned in competitive anyway, so it wouldn't have much of an impact there. It might have gotten unbanned, but then it wouldn't have felt good anyway. So that's kind of like the idea here.
Okay.
For shooting stars. Next, tier 3 feats. I know some people are going to be happy. I'm sure Ted is going nuts about the last one, but we'll go over it. So first, Affiliation again, speeding comet or unique tier 3. So we've lowered the damage by 10. So you used to deal 30, now it deals 20. And the cooldown is now also 120 seconds, up from 90. Speeding comet is very, very strong. It guarantees a heavy afterwards, guarantees a wall spot if there's a wall nearby. You have a lot of damage output, a lot of ganking potential. You have full block while you're running. It's an extremely good feat, right? So we're taking a first step here by lowering its damage by 10. If it needs to be nerfed further, we'll keep an eye on it. We'll see if we can nerf it more. Same for the cooldown, right? It went from 90 seconds to 120. You won't be able to use it as often. Normally, when you get your tier 3 feat, if it's a 2-minute cooldown, you can expect to use it maybe twice, like maybe 3 times in a game, right? Generally. So it won't be as prevalent as it was, hopefully. And then the total effect of it is also a bit lower, right? Lowering it by 10 damage, it makes a difference. It's not a huge difference, but it's enough that it impacts the feat quite a bit. Next, we have Pugio. So Pugio was doing a bit too much damage on top of everything else it does. Guarantees a fully charged heavy, guarantees a bunch of different things. So with this, lowering it to 15 instead of 25, again, 10 less damage, makes the feat, it feels less bad when you get hit by it, right? And then you don't get slave and, not slave, but you get eliminated and pushed down to death, really, really easily. So we want to really change that. We have Fury as well. Fury is the infamous Fury Flask combo or Fury whatever combo. Very, very strong. So we decided to nerf both aspects of Fury. So the damage buff is now 20 and the damage reduction buff is 20 as well. So the combination of Fury and Fire Flask is going to deal less damage. And then the damage reduction you get from Fury as well, it should be a little bit lower. So it's a bit more in line with other buffs that we have that do multiple effects. It's still strong, but you're not gonna. It's gonna be hard to one-shot people when you have Fury active. That's good.
Cool.
Invigorate, Shaolin's unique tier 3 feat. So again, Invigorate kind of is in a weird spot where Shaolin for a long time was not the best hero. We've buffed Shaolin, is now much more playable, which is amazing. But at the same time, Invigorate was a bit of a problem, right? It heals for 8 and cleanses everybody whenever you throw an attack in key stance. No matter if it's blocked, if it's parried, if it hits, if it misses, you are always healing for 8 constantly. And so before it wasn't as much of an issue because it was a lot more difficult to get into key stance and to stay into key stance. But with the flow changes we've been doing to Shaolin in the past year or so, the hero is much, much, much stronger. And so because of this, you go into key stance a lot more often. And then that healing at 8 is a bit too strong, right? Compared to Varangian, that heals for 5 now, and every superior block, and those happen super often. At 4 here, this happens all the time. And so we wanted to really lower the efficiency by half. So it still cleanses. you can still get a lot of healing off of it, just not as much as you used to before.
Okay.
Finally, Oathbreaker. So Oathbreaker is Funbreaker, basically a lot of the time, right? And we understand that it's a lot of, but it's a lot of what we've been saying, right? So the original intent for Oathbreaker was to effectively counter revenge shields, right? That was the main issue and the main design goal for Oathbreaker. But when we initially designed it, Noel was one of our like amazing designers who was working on Black Prayer at the time. We tried it to just remove strip shields, and it didn't feel that good because you're like, oh, you have to time it a lot, and then somebody pops revenge and whatever. So we decided to go. You can pop it a little bit earlier to prevent shields from applying. Turns out, long term, it's better if you just strip shields.
Yeah.
It took a while. We decided we were talking about it for quite a while. How are we gonna adjust this? And there was like really two ways of going about it, right? Either we strip shields or we prevent shields from being applied. And we decided to keep the shield stripping overall. So now for Oathbreaker, like what the line actually says, is you can no longer prevent target from gaining shields.
Gotcha.
So again, before Oathbreaker, the way it works is I see you got your revenge, you haven't popped it yet. I'm gonna do Oathbreaker on you. And you can still pop revenge, but you're not gonna get your shields at all. It removes a lot of the decision and a lot of the timing with the feat when you prevent the shield activation from happening. So instead, what it does now is I have to wait until you pop revenge for me to pop it. You can bait revenge activation. There's a lot of stuff you can do as a player to kind of counter. There's a bit more counterplay to Oathbreaker than it was before. That should make a big difference there. And also, right now, we have a known issue that we're still looking into, like if we're going to keep it as is, which is that normally when we do our feats, we check for is the feat going to do something, right? So in this case, you can still trigger the feat if the person you're locked onto does not have shields. So meaning you can waste the feat. We're going to look into, do we keep it this way? Do we put back the condition? But we wanted to change Oathbreaker at this moment specifically because it's been overperforming. A lot of complaints about it. I completely understand.
Yeah.
So this is kind of like we're addressing it and going in that way. We're going to keep an eye on it as well and see if we need to do like more to it as we go along.
Makes sense.
Finally, tier 4 feats. Fire Flask. So Fire Flask is a Viking unique feat that deals... So the way Fire Flask works is that when you throw, it's kind of like catapult, right? There's a middle, and then there's like it kind of expands. And the damage from the middle started at 50 and it expanded all the way, I think, to 20. So we've lowered the maximum damage to 30, and it expands to the same value, which I think is 20, but it might be 10. I'm sorry, I can forget things sometimes. I'm getting old.
Oh, come on.
That's how it works. But basically is because of this, first of all, the initial impact of Fire Flask is going to deal less damage almost regardless because the curve still stays the same. So if it was at 50 and it drops off to 20, then the closer you are to the middle, the more damage you would take. You would take like closer to 50. Now you're going to take closer to 30, which is much, much lower. It's like 20 less. So the initial impact plus the nerf, rather the nerf, the buff, nerf to Fury means that Fury Flask should give players more time to be able to run out of the fire, go heal, go cleanse, and lower the efficiency of that specific feat combo. But even if we weren't going to nerf Fury, Fire Flask still needed to be nerfed there a little bit.
Yeah.
That's kind of where we're going towards. Spear Storm, right? So Highlander had Spear Storm. It wasn't that much of an issue before because Highlander was not necessarily very competitive. With the recent rework, there's been a big uptick with Highlander. There's still some issues that we're looking to fix in terms of like input comfort and all that sort of stuff. But overall, the hero was much stronger. And so we had to nerf Spear Storm, right? Spear Storm, when it was dealing 70 per wave, could effectively one-shot pretty much everybody, right? If you get hit by the first one, the other two are more or less guaranteed, and you would take like 70 plus 70 plus 70, you'd be dead, no matter if you have like a bunch of perks and feats and whatever. So we're lowering it to 30. It's a massive, massive decrease, but the total max damage you can deal with this is going to be 90, a bit more if you have Fury. But outside of this, like this is a big change for Highlander. This needed to happen because that feat was just, you're dead. And there's nothing you can really do about it. On top of it being hard to hear from external, it comes in pretty quickly. It's like, because there's other heroes that have feats that do almost instant kills or whatever. But the difference is that they're usually a lot more reactable. We wanna have like those feats that if you're gonna be able to deal a massive amount of damage, if the reward is gonna be huge, you need to be able to really time them properly. With this, it was a lot easier to just throw it and nobody saw you and you're dead, right?
Yeah.
So that's the big idea here. Nerfing Spear Storm, so that goes. And finally, we have Fear itself. That decreases the defense of opponents by 40%, down from 50. So it's a smaller nerf on Fear itself, but Fear itself combined with a bunch of other feats ends up being like a little bit too strong. I don't know if you remember the unholy days of Peacekeeper having sharpened blades and Fear itself and just going, hey, I'm going to bleed you for your entire life in one shot.
I mean,
that was fun.
they were fun for a while.
Yeah, for a little while,
For a
right?
little while,
When
yeah.
PK was like top tier. So by lowering that a little bit, it lowers the effectiveness of that feat. Not by a massive amount. We're going to keep an eye on it again to see where that goes.
Cool.
So that's it for feats.
That's
So
a
essentially,
lot.
yeah. So this was supposed to go in a testing rounds.
Yeah.
And I think we can all agree that we can push all of these live. We don't need to do a testing round for this.
Yeah.
We're good to go.
There you go. And so
All right.
enjoy that.
Yeah.